Hello and welcome to another episode about panoramas, and here we want to talk about a nodal point. And I have to tell you that I have listened to over a decade now to theories about the nodal point and how to get it. And the practical way how to get it is simple, but where it is maybe a longer story, and I try to keep it here very short. And I have listened to a lot of stories, so I want to give you here my last version, and I believe that is the one after 10 or more years by now. That is the right one. So what we have here normally is a sensor with a very specific size. And of course, when we have here red, we have a very specific size, but we can go and say this is here in 2K picture and 4K, or even with the Dragon now 6K. Whatever. What important is that we want to have a picture here for our panoramas that fills exactly this area, and we want to have a core picture here that gives us exactly what we want, and then these areas here should be the areas that overlaps. Then we have a lens, if that fits to the camera, that has a larger circle around the sensor than the sensor in size is. If the sensor is larger than the circle, we will have black vignetting here, and that is then the case when we have a lens that is too small. And so normally the lens that fits to a camera has a larger circle, which is not the focal length. Do not confuse this. The focal length is something else. I don't want to go here into detail. We want to talk about the nodal point. And the nodal point is dependent on the front element here. This is the main idea at all. Of course, we have here smaller lenses in, and we have here our aperture, and we have then smaller and a little bit bigger lens, and so the ray goes here in, goes smaller, and crosses here, and then goes here to the sensor. Not our business here for the nodal point, and we are not interested in it, even if we could think that this crossing point here exactly could be a nice rotation point, but we will see that is not the truth. What we have here, and I switch to a different color, that we want to have this point here exactly, not the outside, not this outside point, this point where we want to have finally the overlapping area, and this is then here exactly. So a little bit blurry, but you get the idea. It's not the outside of the sensor, it's a little bit inside. We normally say 30-degree overlapping for a panorama one time around for each picture, and these overlapping areas should be exactly the same. The left and the right from the next picture should exactly be in the same way, so we have no problems to stitch them together. If they are different, it looks horrible. So our main target is to get from one picture to the next picture the same overlapping area. What is then inside of this one here will be of course different. So when we go with the outer lens here with the front element into the game, we have here a point that is then here this circle. Not interested in that, because lenses have distortion, more or less. There's maybe one or other lens that has nearly no distortion, but sometimes they have, and that means this ray here that we have here moves a little bit faster or slower to the middle axis than when we want to describe the whole picture. And faster and slower means here just we have the distortion. And so when we want to talk about finding exactly this point here, so we have the same point on the next picture, we want to know this line, of course. That means when we do our tests here then, and I'll show you that in Cinema 4D, we want to have then exactly this point as the starting point when we start to rotate the camera around and compare these two broomsticks, for example. Broomsticks? I will show you that just a second. So we take here this line as this point that sits on the middle of the overlapping area, and we have then here a line. It's symmetrical, so this line must help here for the time being. This would go here also smaller, and then wider, or whatever happens, not so important. Important is this line here. That means we have here a little bit overlapping and a little bit overlapping here. And then we can draw here the next line, and we have here again overlapping, and so on, and so on, and so on. And you see here already, bang, we have our panorama with the overlapping areas here. So from here to here is always one picture, and from here, I put this down, to here is another picture, overlapping area. Very important part here. And all these lines here, they go to one point ideally. And this is the nodal point. And there we have to take a look. Not in the middle, not far outside, exactly there. So we should have an idea how many pictures we take and what lens we use and which sensor we have and all of that. But on the end, it counts that these overlapping areas are the same. Anything else is secondary, to say the least. So that can happen finally, that when we have a long lens, that these lines here, they continue behind the camera. And when we take here this line, it is maybe behind the camera and behind the lens. For a wide angle lens, maybe this line here goes then to this line, and we can see here it would go very fast. Now it becomes here confusing, but the main idea is the front element in the area that we use and the points that we want to have as overlapping is the final answer. Nothing else. Not this one here, but it can be. In some cases, this crossing point might be exactly on the point where the front lens gives me here this line. And it's outside of the lens, the line. Nothing inside of the camera. All placed together. And so let's get started with Cinema 4D and to show you how you set up your nodal point and then rotate exactly the camera around this point. When it is here, the camera stays with this distance, and then we rotate the camera or revolve it in this case. Okay, let's have a look. I have prepared here the scene, and the easiest way to explain that, the null object is here for me the tripod. It's placed on 0, 0, 0 and has no angle in it, no orientation or rotation or whatever. It's just straight as the origin point of the world system. And the camera is at the moment exactly in the same way. So we have here exactly our parallax point, our non-parallax point. And some people get crazy when you say nodal point because they confuse this with the nodal point of the camera. It's of course always the nodal point or the non-parallax point of the lens. The lens is the most important part in this process. To find exactly this point is the target of this drill here. And I will show you this and another way to do that. Of course, what we have here is maybe a broomstick, maybe a C-stand, maybe something that lines up with something in the far distance. That can be everything. It only needs to have a distance to the camera and a far distance to everything else. So we have this object here in the scene, we have this object in the scene, and the tripod with the pano head, and of course the camera. Okay, what we want to have here is of course that when we rotate the camera around the vertical axis, that this object and this object here will not move away from each other. If they move away from each other, then it is pretty clear that the overlapping of these two images that we have seen in Petit Gouet, when here's maybe the overlapping area, and they don't overlap here, these two guys, then we have a conflict in the picture. So these two sticks here, or two borders, or whatever it is, should be exactly line up for picture 1 and for picture 2. And then after it is undistorted or distorted, whatever you like, whatever needs to be done to make them fit to each other, it should be always exactly on top of each other. Because you can only distort an image in this way, but you can't undistort background and foreground from each other. So this is the whole setup, and you will get maybe a little bit confused right now with all these stuff here, but you see in an instant how simple that is. First of all, I take the doodle object here away and I go to the foresight view. I have created here this camera, and this is the view of the camera, very simple. And when I go to the camera by itself and I rotate this, I see these sticks here, these two sticks or borders or whatever it is, door frame and window frame or whatever, they do not move away from each other. They stick exactly. So when I have an image like this, they fit on top of each other, and when I move the camera, I want to have the overlapping that I had here. That should fit then on this position, and so these two guys line up and everything is fine. I go to my camera, set it back to 0, 0, 0. What I will do now is to move the camera to the back. So this has no impact here at the moment to these two sticks here, as you can see. But now I have to rotate, of course, around the tripod, because the camera by itself has no mechanism in it. So let's rotate this here, and you see these sticks here go now apart from each other. In the middle they are fine, and to the border they are not. Now think about, when you line up now two images based on the red stick, then you have one time the green stick or border on the left, one time on the right side. Just like that. And the same happens, of course. I put both back to 0, 0, 0, so we have the same starting positions. The same happens, of course, when I go here closer to these guys. And again, I rotate now here my tripod, and now we see we have the same problem. It doesn't work very well. They don't stick to each other. In the moment I put my null object back to 0, 0 and rotate it again, I have my problem because the camera is not there. Just check this, and now everything works fine again. The next experiment is something that I have seen many times, and I like the simplicity of it. It's a cylinder, and we need no caps for that. And we rotate this to the side here, just with the shift key down 90 degrees, and we move it in front of the camera. That can be a small one, it doesn't have to be a big one. Anything that just let you look through this here. Very nice. And what we want to achieve here is, of course, that this ring that we see stays exactly as it is. So when I go to my null object and I rotate this null object here, can see the ring is fine, and that indicates we can work with the camera point as it is now. So when I go here back to 0, 0, 0 and I do exactly what I do always, I move here the camera maybe very strongly up front to make the point here, and I do it now only in one direction. I think you got already the point. So when I move now here the camera, you can see easily that it doesn't stay stable as a ring. It's more like an ellipse now here. It goes here, and when I go to the side you might see it goes even outside. So you can see outside of the tube, and then you know already that's bad. And that can be everything, maybe even a part of your tripod or something like that. That's something that I like as well, and you might find something similar. It can be everything, a chair in front of the camera, maybe 6 feet or so, and then a window in the background. Anything that can be lined up, and then move the camera left to the right. If there is this kind of movement, you have to adjust the camera, and there are some parts available to make that easy from Manfrotto or some other companies, and that helps, of course. And in the moment this ring here is stable, then you have found the right position, and again, then start shooting, and you have less work during stitching. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye.